Sauropod dinosaurs were generally strange animals, but there's something particularly unusual about Atlasaurus. While not the strangest looking sauropod, its body proportions were remarkably odd, with a slightly larger head, a notably short neck, and exceptionally long, slender legs that accounted for nearly half of its 9 meters height. Its tall shoulders and sloping back closely resemble those of Brachiosaurids, leading to initial speculation that it was an early member of that group. However, recent studies suggest it may have belonged to an earlier branch of sauropods known as Turriosaurs, indicating that its brachiosaur-like appearance was due to convergent evolution. Other short-necked sauropods seem adapted for feeding on low vegetation a couple of meters off the ground, but Atlasaurus' long legs imply it was a high browser like the brachiosaurids it mimicked. Its long legs might have allowed for faster movement or helped it navigate rough terrain. Yet, since no other sauropod evolved in this manner, Atlasaurus must have had a unique adaptation. Lessemsaurus has been a subject of fascination among paleontologists and enthusiasts alike. Its unique characteristics and early appearance in the dinosaur timeline offer valuable insights into the evolution of these animals. With a long neck and herbivorous habits, it is considered one of the earlier sauropodomorphs, illustrating the diversity of dinosaur life even in the distant past. Its material reveals an unusual combination of plesiomorphic character states present in many non-eusauropod sauropodomorphs together with derived characters that suggest affinities with eusauropods and related taxa. Antitonitrus may have measured 8 to 10 meters in length and around 2 meters in hip height, with a body mass of 6 tons. Its neural arches were not fused with the centra, suggesting it was not fully grown. It exhibited several advanced sauropod features but retained some primitive traits, such as a flexible thumb capable of grasping. Unlike its smaller, lightly built ancestors, Antitonitrus was primarily quadrupedal with adaptations for increased body size, such as broader wrist bones and an elliptical femur cross-section. Its fossils were recovered from the early Jurassic Upper Elliott Formation, making it one of the oldest known sauropods. Early sauropods were widespread due to the supercontinent Pangaea, facilitating global dispersal. Ledgemahadi was likely a quadruped, as determined by analysis of the circumference of its humerus and femur compared to those of other dinosaurs. It would have had very large, robust forelimbs, consistent with those of its relatives. Unlike those of later sauropods, these limbs were naturally flexed, as opposed to being purely columnar. At its time in the early Jurassic epoch, Ledgemahadi is thought to have been the largest land animal that had ever lived. At the age of 14 years, it is estimated to have reached a maximum size of around 12 tons in body mass, significantly larger than its relatives. Initially, sauropods were thought to be mainly aquatic, inhabiting lush peat swamps and being captive to the buoyancy of water to support their giant body weights. In 1984, Cooper pointed out that Vulcanodon, the most primitive sauropod known at that time, lived in a desert-like environment and therefore must have been terrestrial. This indicated that the large body size of sauropods, as already seen in Vulcanodon, had not evolved as an adaptation to an aquatic lifestyle. As one of the earliest and basalmost sauropods, it is important for understanding the early evolution of this group. Sauropods descend from basal sauropodomorphs, which were primitively bipedal. While Vulcanodon already was fully quadrupedal, its limb proportions were intermediate between those of its prosauropod ancestors and those of later, more derived sauropods. Spinophorosaurus that lived in Niger during the Middle Jurassic period. Excavated in the 2000, the first 2 specimens were brought to Europe, digitally replicated, and 3D printed, representing one of the most complete basal sauropod skeletons. Estimated at 14 meters in length and weighing about 7 tons, Spinophorosaurus had a unique combination of primitive and advanced sauropod features, such as spatulate teeth and air-filled vertebrae. Initially thought to have tail spikes, these were later identified as clavicles. Its anatomy and location suggest significant developments in sauropod evolution occurred in North Africa. Spinophorosaurus retained a large vestibular apparatus, which may be linked to neck length and mobility, emphasizing vision and coordinated movements, although the exact reason remains uncertain. Although a very early and unspecialized sauropod, Rebbachisaurus shows the building plan typical for later, more derived sauropods, the cervical vertebrae were elongated, resulting in a long neck. The trunk was short and holds columnar limbs which indicate an obligate quadrupedal posture. Even the size, which is estimated at approximately 14 meters long and 7 tons in weight, is comparable with that of later sauropods. The vertebral column already shows many traits that are typical for later sauropods which allowed them to attain great body sizes, although in later sauropods these traits are much more developed. From the skull, only 3 whole teeth and 3 crowns are known. The largest known tooth is 6 centimeters in height. Like that of later sauropods, the teeth are spoon-shaped and show wrinkled enamel. A basal trait is the coarse serration. Rhedosaurus was an average-sized sauropod, reaching up to 15 meters in length and weighing about 9 tons. Named after the Greek giant Rhedos, it was similar in size to Wyntonodontine from Queensland's late Cretaceous. It had primitive features but also some advanced characteristics like hollow cavities in its bones and elongated neck vertebrae. It had a combination of unique features, including solid anterior vertebrae, robust neural spines and a large neural canal in the anterior caudal. Found in the Middle Jurassic Hutton sandstone near Roma, Rhedosaurus lived in a lush, humid environment with Araucaria conifers and other vegetation. As a browsing herbivore, it likely fed on conifers and ferns, and could walk at speeds of up to 15 kilometers per hour. Shunosaurus was first estimated to be 11 meters long, later and more complete finds indicated a somewhat smaller size. It was very short-necked for a sauropod. The skulls found are mostly compressed or disarticulated and the interpretation of the head form has varied from broad, short and deep to extremely narrow and pointed. The upper and lower jaws were strongly curved upwards, allowing them to function as a pair of garden shears. Its neck length indicates that Shunosaurus was a low browser. Published in 1989 was the discovery that the tail ended in a club, equipped on its top with 2 successive spikes formed by cone-shaped osteoderms with a length of 5 centimeters. The club was probably used to fend off predators. The form of its jaws is well adapted to processing large amounts of coarse plant material. Shunosaurus accounts for 90% of the fossils found in the Deschamps fauna, showing it was a dominant and/or common member of its habitat and environment. Rebbachisauridae was a primitive sauropod, about 18 meters long and estimated to weigh about 22 tons. Its backbone and tail were simple compared to the complex vertebrae and whiplash tail of the later North America sauropods Diplodocus. It may also have been able to rear up on its hind legs, as Paul Sereno concluded, after comparing the ratios of humerus and femur circumferences in Rebbachisauridae to extant elephants. The weight distribution of Rebbachisauridae indicates that it was supported by the rear limbs rather than the forelimbs, and is speculated that as elephants can rear up, then it would have been able to more easily. Zby atlanticus, a sauropod dinosaur from the late Jurassic of Portugal. It was a close relative of Turriosaurus, the largest dinosaur currently known from Europe, and although Zby itself wasn't quite so enormous, it was still pretty big, probably measuring somewhere around 15 to 19 meters long. All the sauropods known from late Jurassic Portugal seem to have grown to very large adult sizes. The complete lack of medium or small form suggests that other types of herbivorous dinosaurs may have dominated the region's lower browsing niches at the time. Discovered in England in the early 1840s, Cetiosaurus was initially mistaken for a massive marine reptile, hence its name meaning whale lizard. It was only identified as a dinosaur a couple of decades later, and in the 1870s, more complete sauropod discoveries in North America led to its recognition as a long-necked dinosaur. Cetiosaurus quickly became a wastebasket taxon, with fragmentary fossils from various locations lumped under its name, resulting in nearly 20 dubious species by the end of the 20th century. A major revision in the early 2000s determined that only one species, Cetiosaurus oxoniensis from mid-Jurassic England, was valid. It has a small head atop a long neck, a chunky four-legged body with mitten-like forefeet and three-clawed hind feet, and a long tapering tail. Since Patagosaurus is known from many specimens, including at least one juvenile, its anatomy and growth are fairly well understood. Both ages exhibit the typical features of a sauropod, a long neck, small head, a long tail and being quadrupedal. The juvenile exhibits features different from the adult in regions like the mandible, pectoral girdle, pelvis and hind limb, although overall their anatomy is quite similar. The many known specimens help fill in gaps in the anatomy of the genus, such as the forelimb and skull. The teeth are reminiscent of more derived sauropods. They are similar in morphology to Euhelipus, being concave on one side as well as having crowns with fairly great expansions. Datasaurus was about 15 meters long and herbivorous. It had a deep large skull for a sauropod. The rarity of its fossils suggests that it may not have been as social as other sauropods, which are often preserved in large numbers in a single deposit. Datasaurus and Shunosaurus were both closely related animals with similar anatomies. However, Datasaurus's elongated vertebrae gave it a higher reach and its teeth were more spoon-shaped. This may be a sign that these contemporaries fed on different plants or at different heights in the trees. This strategy may have reduced competition between the two genera. A similar pattern of height difference possibly associated with feeding behaviors is found in the Diplodocids. Omisaurus was a long-necked herbivorous dinosaur that lived in herds around 168 to 163 million years ago. It likely had a very large appetite, possibly consuming up to 1 ton of plants each day. It had a very long neck that helped it to grasp foliage, a rounded body, giving it a small surface area compared to its volume. This helped it to keep warm by reducing heat loss. Omisaurus was formerly assigned to Euhelopodidae. However, it and other Jurassic sauropods from Asia formerly assigned to Euhelopodidae are now placed in the separate family Mamenchisauridae, which is more basal in Sauropoda. The neck posture and feeding strategies of sauropod dinosaurs is a controversial topic. Andreas Christian and colleagues analyzed the neck of Mamenchisauridae like Chuangosaurus and found that when articulated in a neutral posture, the neck was almost straight, with a slight upward bend at the base and a slight downward bend towards the head. The base of the neck has comparatively high upward flexibility but limited downward flexibility. The region near the head had better downward flexibility and low upward flexibility. In the mid-region, downward flexibility was high, which led the authors to conclude that it frequently fed at low levels. Long overlapping cervical ribs may have limited flexibility. The authors also estimated the stress on the intervertebral joint cartilage. Their results suggest the neck was kept mostly straight, with the possible exception of the neck base and near the head. Mamenchisaurus is renowned for its exceptionally long neck, which could make up half of its total body length. The neck had 19 vertebrae, which is more than most other sauropods. It was one of the largest sauropods, with some species estimated to reach lengths of up to 35 meters and weigh as much as 60 tons. Despite its long neck, the vertebrae of Mamenchisaurus were relatively light because they were filled with air sacs. This adaptation reduced the weight of the neck, making it easier for the dinosaur to support and maneuver. The cervical ribs were unusually long and overlapped multiple vertebrae. These ribs likely provided extra support and helped stabilize the long neck. The long neck allowed it to access a wide range of vegetation without moving its massive body, making it an efficient feeder in its Jurassic environment. Some species had a bony club at the end of their tail, possibly used for defense against predators. Like many other large sauropods, Mamenchisaurus had pneumatic bones, which not only made its skeleton lighter but also might have played a role in its respiratory system, akin to modern birds. Evidence suggests that Mamenchisaurus might have lived and moved in herds, which would have provided protection against predators and facilitated social interactions. Xinjiang Titan was also one of the longest known sauropods, measuring 32 meters long and weighing up to 40 tons. It was diagnosed based on the following traits: the presence of a ventral keel on the penultimate cervical centrum that forms a small semicircular process under the distal articular facet. Both cervical vertebrae are relatively elongated, the sacrocostal yoke except the first sacral rib, and an extremely robust femur. The series of dorsal vertebrae has a length of 3.5 meters. Rebbachisaurus was a diplodocoid sauropod from the mid-Cretaceous of Morocco. It's estimated to have reached lengths of up to 15 meters and was closely related to several other near-identical sauropods across Africa, Europe, and South America, suggesting that a land connection remained between the separating Africa and South America for much longer than previously thought. It had a tall ridge down its back, formed by high neural spines that were incredibly lightly built, full of air spaces to reduce their weight, but unfortunately this also resulted in the fossilized bones being very fragile, and only a few fragmentary pieces of the full animal have been found. Nigersaurus is known for its highly unusual dental arrangement. It had over 500 teeth arranged in rows within a broad, flat, and square-shaped muzzle. Its teeth were continually replaced throughout its life, with new teeth growing in rows behind the active ones. Its teeth were adapted for ground-level feeding. The structure of its jaws and the arrangement of its teeth suggest that it was a selective browser, likely feeding on soft vegetation close to the ground. It had an unusually wide jaw that was wider than its skull, allowing it to efficiently crop large swaths of vegetation. This adaptation is unique among sauropods and highlights its specialized feeding strategy. Unlike many other sauropods, it had a relatively short neck. This feature, combined with its specialized teeth, suggests it was adapted to feeding on low-lying plants. The skull of Nigersaurus had an unusual orientation, with the teeth pointing directly forward. This is different from other sauropods and underscores its unique feeding adaptations. Only fragmentary remains of Agastinia are known, including parts of the vertebrae, lower hind limb, and a fragmented femur. Initially, its supposed armor plates were interpreted as vertical spikes and plates like those of Stegosaurus, but later studies revealed these were likely fragments of ribs and hip bones. Histological analysis confirmed that the purported osteoderms did not match the internal structure of other titanosaurian osteoderms. The fibula indicates Agastinia may have been about 15 meters long, with a tibia thinner than those of other titanosaurs. The remains are too fragmentary to distinctly separate Agastinia from other sauropods, leading some to consider it a nomen dubium. However, recent studies have upheld its validity based on unique vertebral characteristics. As a member of the Dicraeosauridae family, Brachytrachelopin was a close relative of the spiky-necked Amargasaurus and was about the same size, roughly 10 meters long. However, it had the shortest neck of any known sauropod, suggesting it was adapted for a distinct diet compared to other sauropods. Rauhut and colleagues also suggested that diet may have been a limiting factor in body size among Dicraeosaurids, and that this may have placed them in the same ecological niche as large low-browsing iguanodontian ornithopods. Such large iguanodontians are absent from the late Jurassic Gondwanan sediments that have produced all known fossils of Dicraeosaurids, while they are abundant in similar ecosystems of the same age in North America, where Dicraeosaurids are absent. This may indicate that large iguanodontians and Dicraeosaurids were ecological analogues, resulting from parallel evolution in two distantly related dinosaurian lineages. Unlike most diplodocoids, Dicraeosaurus had a relatively large head and a short, wide neck with only 12 unusually short vertebrae, suggesting it fed on vegetation no more than 3 meters above the ground. It also lacked the distinctive whiplash tail tip common to other diplodocoids. Measuring around 15 meters in length and weighing 5 to 6 tons, Dicraeosaurus was smaller than many of its relatives but still one of the larger members of Dicraeosauridae. Its notable feature is the tall neural spines on its vertebrae, which formed a rough Y shape and likely provided muscle attachment points. It lived alongside fossils of Giraffatidan and Kentrosaurus. Its different size likely meant it browsed at a different vegetation level, reducing competition with other herbivores in its ecosystem. Amargasaurus was a sauropod dinosaur with a very distinctive-looking skeleton, sporting a double row of long bony spines along its neck and back. It was fairly small compared to many other sauropods, with a proportionally short neck compared to its body size. And despite being known from fairly complete skeletal remains, there's still a lot we don't know about this dinosaur, especially what was actually going on with those vertebral spines. While it's sometimes been depicted with skin sails over the spines, for the last couple of decades the general opinion has trended towards them being more likely to have been covered by spiky keratinous horn-like sheaths. But recently that's been brought back into question. A detailed study of the microscopic bone structure of Amargasaurus spines shows no evidence for keratin attachment and instead found textures associated with skin coverings, along with an extensive web of ligaments connecting the spines to each other along each row. Vegetation, like other Dicraeosaurids, had elongated and bifurcated neural spines, which were notably longer compared to those of Dicraeosaurus, and similar to those of Amargasaurus. These spines might have supported a sail or horny sheaths, serving functions such as display, defense, or thermoregulation. Research by Schwartz and colleagues in 2007 suggested that these spines enclosed an air sac connected to the respiratory system, with a horny sheath possibly covering the upper two-thirds of the spines. Galina and colleagues in 2019 speculated that the spines could have been used for defense against predators, with the horny sheaths potentially breaking off upon impact while protecting the bony core. However, a 2022 study by Lacerda and colleagues found no evidence of keratinized sheaths and suggested that the spines were likely covered by a sail of skin. Additionally, Vegetasaurus might have had a beak-like structure, inferred from indirect evidence, which could have aided in feeding by reducing jaw stress and providing a cutting edge. Apatosaurus had a relatively long neck, but unlike some other sauropods like Diplodocus, its cervical vertebrae were less elongated and more robust. This structure suggests that Apatosaurus had a sturdy neck, possibly aiding in browsing from a more elevated position compared to others. To support its massive size, like other sauropods, it had air sacs within its vertebrae. These air sacs made the bones lighter by creating internal cavities, reducing the overall weight of the skeleton and helping the dinosaur to support its large body more efficiently. The tail was likely used as a whip-like structure. The tail's elongation and robustness suggest it could have been employed for defensive purposes or to create loud noises, similar to other diplodocids. Recent theories also suggest that the tail might have served as a sensory organ. Unlike Diplodocus, which had a more elongated and flexible neck, Apatosaurus had a more robust and shorter neck. This difference indicates variations in feeding strategies and ecological niches between these closely related sauropods. The bones, particularly the vertebrae, were highly vascularized. This feature suggests that the bones were actively growing and that the dinosaur had a well-developed system for maintaining bone health and structure. Its tail was held off the ground during normal locomotion, a trait that possibly helped in maintaining balance and stability. The tail structure suggests it could have been used for various functions, including communication and defense. Brontosaurus is a genus of herbivorous sauropod dinosaur that lived in what is now the United States during the late Jurassic period. Described by Othniel Charles Marsh in 1879, its type species is Excelsus, based on partial skeletons from Como Bluff. For many years, it was thought to be a synonym of Apatosaurus, but a 2015 study confirmed it as a distinct genus. Brontosaurus had a large, long neck, robust cervical vertebrae, and a long tail with a whip-like end. It had short, stout forelimbs and elongated hind limbs, with size estimates showing the largest species reaching up to 22 meters long and weighing 17 tons. Despite its significant representation in popular culture, the taxonomic status of Brontosaurus remains debated, with some scientists still considering it a synonym of Apatosaurus. Supersaurus is one of the largest dinosaurs known, potentially reaching lengths of 33 to 46 meters, with estimates suggesting some specimens could exceed 40 meters. The specimens are estimated to have weighed between 35 and 44 tons. A 2024 study found the Jimbo specimen to be among the oldest known dinosaurs, with an age estimate of 225 years, though this high figure is likely a methodological artifact. The same study found the age of a 33 meters Diplodocus halorum to be 60 years old, which makes it among the oldest known dinosaurs too, but considered the age of Jimbo to be even greater due to the extensive remodeling of the bone. Diplodocus was a very long dinosaur, with some species reaching lengths of up to 27 meters. It was characterized by its extremely long neck and tail, which contributed to its overall length. Its neck, composed of 15 to 17 elongated cervical vertebrae, was long and slender. Unlike some sauropods with robust necks, Diplodocus had a relatively lightweight and flexible neck, likely used for browsing vegetation high up in trees. It had a whip-like tail that was used for defense or communication. The tail is believed to have been capable of producing a loud noise, akin to a whip, which could serve as a warning to predators or rivals. The vertebrae had extremely elongated neural spines. These spines gave the appearance of a sail along its back and may have played a role in balance, display, or thermoregulation. It likely fed on conifers and cycads, and its feeding strategy involved sweeping its head from side to gather vegetation. Its long, slender legs were adapted for supporting its massive weight, and its body was built for a slow, deliberate movement. Diplodocus exhibited rapid growth rates during its juvenile years, reaching full size relatively quickly compared to other dinosaurs. Growth studies have shown that it could grow several meters per year during its peak growth periods. Unlike some other sauropods, it lacked armor plates or osteoderms. Its defensive strategy relied more on its sheer size and tail rather than physical armor. Evidence suggests that Diplodocus might have lived in herds or groups. Fossilized tracks and bone beds indicate that these dinosaurs may have traveled together, which could have provided safety in numbers and facilitated social interactions. Diplodocus has been a popular exhibit in museums around the world. Its large, dramatic skeletons have become iconic representations of sauropod dinosaurs, contributing to its status as a quintessential long-necked dinosaur in public imagination. Cetiosaurus was relatively small compared to most diplodocids. The type individual was estimated to have been approximately 14 meters long. The combined length of the skull and neck is approximately 3.8 meters. The neck was composed of at least 14 vertebrae, comparable to the typical number in diplodocids. It is known from well-preserved skull and cervical vertebrae which were collected in the lower part of the Morrison Formation. It was initially considered a basal diplodocid, but eventually, its small size is explained as an adaptation to compete for food with much larger sauropods. The structure of the cervical vertebrae of Barosaurus allowed for a significant degree of lateral flexibility in the neck, but restricted vertical flexibility. This suggests a different feeding style for this genus when compared to other diplodocids. It swept its neck in long arcs at ground level when feeding, which resembled the strategy that was first proposed by John Martin in 1987. The restriction in vertical flexibility suggests that Barosaurus did not primarily feed on vegetation that was high off the ground. Barosaurus had a unique morphology with a long neck and a relatively short body compared to some other sauropods. Its neck vertebrae were notably elongated, contributing to its impressive neck length. Unlike its relatives, Barosaurus had a more robust build, which is evident in its skeletal structure.